committee was used for. Okay, so I don't want to hear about bipartisanship when they destroyed this committee over nonsense for 2 years. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Burchett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I come at this maybe a little different background. My father fought in the Pacific in the Second World War, and then in the Marine Corps, 1st Marine Division. Everybody's heard me tell these stories, but after the war, he was on Okinawa, and they were getting ready to invade Japan, they thought, and they dropped the bomb on Japan, and both bombs, and then they were told they were going to go home, and he was not sent home. They sent some Marines over to China, and Daddy was, I think one of the greatest regrets in his life till the day he died was that he felt like we turned our back on them. And he would talk about how, during the war, they could literally move mountains if they had to. I mean, the people would, I guess it's the slave labor, I'm not sure. And they could literally move a factory from one area, just take it apart piece by piece, and then just humans carrying it to another area, people dying. And then after the war, the hunger for, really for democracy and capitalism. Kids would stand on a street corner with a 1st grade primer and read something, and they'd be stuck, and they'd say, GI, what's this word, what's this word? And they'd tell them. And they understood the value of the American dollar. And I could tell you all these stories, but I come at it from a little different angle because I see the Chinese people as wonderful folks. I see their leadership as some very abusive, horrible people. And their plan, the 100-year plan, the 1,000-year plan, to me it doesn't really matter. It's their folks are there and they're being abused for their own purposes, for their leadership. But Dr. Thayer, you said you'd written that the Trump administration was the start of effective resistance to the Chinese Communist Party. Could you explain to me how that is?
Certainly. Thank you, Congressman Burchett, for the question. The Trump administration recognized the threat that we faced from the Chinese Communist Party, and that it had been waging the world's most successful political warfare campaign against the United States by making so many of the American elite partners with the Chinese Communist Party. And the Trump administration was the first administration after obviously the Clinton post-Cold War administrations, from Clinton through Bush to Obama to Trump, that tried to turn the rudder over, recognizing the nature of the threat, that it was the regime that was the threat. It was the Chinese Communist Party that is the threat to the United States because of its ideology. It is not the Chinese people with whom we have common cause, and people who've suffered greatly, horribly, with scores of millions of individuals killed in China by the Chinese Communist Party. So we both suffer the consequences of that odious regime, and the Trump administration recognized that and took measures starting to turn the rudder over. There's much more work to be done, Congressman, as you well know, as this committee knows, but that was a good start.
Do any of y'all feel like the Biden-Harris administration implement these same strategies?
The Biden and Harris administration has not implemented the same strategies. They have gone back to a form of what I call, with my frequent co-author Jim Fennell, a neo-engagement policy, which is to continue sustained rates of trade interaction, all the hallmarks that defined Clinton through Obama, which is sustaining the CCP at a time where they are incredibly weak, where they're suffering political crises within the Chinese Communist Party due to the tyranny of Xi Jinping, and they're suffering profound economic problems, ultimately due to the misrule of their communist economic policies, but to the collapse of their real estate markets and a series of structural as well as more immediate economic problems that they face. They're supremely vulnerable, and now is the time to take advantage, in the sense of political warfare, against that regime.
All y'all agree to that? Stokes?
No, I think the Biden-Harris administration has shared the diagnosis of the challenge with the Trump administration, but had a little bit of a different tack in terms of responding to it. So, I don't think it's fair to call it neo-engagement. I would say it's still strategic competition, right? And that there's more of an emphasis on building up alliances and partnerships. You've seen the progress with the Quad, you've seen AUKUS, you've seen revival of alliances with the Philippines and Japan and so on. On the technological side, you've seen both affirmative efforts to improve the U.S. posture and Chips and Science Act, but also pretty extreme, at least in Beijing's view, actions to slow down China's technological rise, relate on chips and other areas as well, AI, biotech, and so on. And then a very, very strong and consistent stance on human rights issues, particularly related to Uyghurs, Hong Kong, and so on, and a deepened partnership with Taiwan. So I think that there is a certain amount of bipartisan continuity here, and it's more about how do we, what policies do we adopt to actually deal with this problem now that we sort of agree on what the problem is.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I've run over. I'd just say that economically, Americans, unfortunately, are going to pay the cheapest they can get, and you just can't get past slave labor that we're dealing with competing with China, and that's unfortunate. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I ran over.
You're right. Chair, good question. Chair recognizes Mr. Garcia from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses. Clearly,